Hello, everyone. My name is Manny Singh. I'm a associate professor and cropping systems agronomist here at Michigan State University. Uh, Thanks everyone for joining us today. And I'll be talking about how we can think about optimizing corn hybrid maturity selections when we are picking our corn hybrids and how that decision might depend on planting date, right? There are a number of factors that we have to think through when we plan to pick our corn hybrids. And we can think about why relative maturity is among them, and we can start that by looking at this data that we recently published, pretty much showing you length of the growing season based on your location, right? And again, these data are based on the frost event in the spring and fall, right? So uh, this does not account for the planting date as well as the relative maturity of your hybrid. And those two factors in combination decides the actual length of the growing season, and making sure that you are optimizing that and not over or underutilizing that growing season, right? This is especially true for the folks in the north, as you can see in this data, because the length of the season is a limiting factor, right, for these farmers. Another aspect that's happening recently is this season is expanding. You can see this data from Michigan, Lansing location, that our frost-free days have been going up over the last three decades or so. Again, due to the first fall occurring later in the season, and then the last spring frost occurring a little bit earlier, right? So the growing season is expanding, and it gives us opportunities to again think about how we can optimize our relative maturities, planting dates to match what we have now, right? When we think about again relative maturities for corn, there are resources available out there, right? Seed companies have a lot of resources. We have recently published a paper on this with this map I'm showing you over here across the whole US. This was based on the variety or the hybrid testing program that most states do. And you can see again the spread in maturities here all the way from mid 80s, early 90s in the north, all the way to late 100s in the south, right? We have done something similar for Michigan as well. Here you can see again data from our corn hybrid testing program from about 15 years or so. You can see a nice latitudinal gradient going from north to south in terms of the optimal relative maturities, right? So why am I talking about this again today, right? I think one caveat with these maps, these resources, is they are based on typical planting dates. A lot of these variety trials that universities or seed companies conduct, they are done, as an example, in Michigan, mid to late May, the typical planting time. So it's not accounting for what happens as our planting window shifts if we are planting a little bit early because of this expansion of growing season, or what happens when the planting gets delayed, right? We all remember 2019, and we are already into first week of June. Should we be switching those maturities or not, right? So the data is lacking on that piece. Also, these maps are based on the relative maturities that maximize our yield, right? Not essentially profit. And that's not ideal in the economic market we are in currently, right? Where the prices are, we need to be thinking about maximizing profits. So we need to be accounting for corn prices, also dry down cost, as well as any discounts if we are dealing with low test weight and things like that, right? So again, there is a lack of research on this topic in terms of optimal relative maturities based on planting times, and how that even differentiates between different regions. So my program has spent a lot of time over the last 4 or 5 years looking into this. You can see the location. Most of this work I will be presenting today is from. sort of south central Michigan, about 42 and a half degrees north. So the data I'll be presenting is probably more relevant around those latitudes, right? Probably anywhere from 40 to 43 degree north latitudes in terms of the specifics. But the overall concept I'm talking about here in terms of how relative maturities interact with planting date is still relevant, right? So keep that in mind as we look through some of these data. In terms of how we did the trials for our location, 99 RM is our optimal typical relative maturity. So we compared that to some late, longer maturities, 104, 109, as well as early going to 94 or even 89 maturities across different planting dates, right? We went with the typical planting date around here, early May, compared to, again, end of April and later plantings into end of May and early June, and see how that interaction works out, right? Let's look at data starting with the yield. That's again the most important variable we think about. I'll show you a couple of these data by planting dates, and then we'll put everything together, right? So here I'm showing you the relation between relative maturities and yield for our April planting date. And you can see a positive and a significant relation, right? Compared to 99, when we went to 104 or 109 relative maturity, we did improve our yield, and we lost yield as we went to early maturities, right? And that relation held true for our May 10th planting time as well. That was actually our best yielding planting date pretty much for all of these relative maturities. I think we gained almost 5 to 10% with our May 10th compared to end of April planting, because of, I think what we are seeing is corn does not like those non-ideal early season field conditions, cool and wet soils that can lead to delayed as well as more variable emergence, and we might lose yield pushing corn into these non-early planting conditions. So something to keep in mind. But again, May 10th was a classic case of seeing this interaction, right? Very significant p-value R squares. When we looked at our end of May and June plantings, you can see the relation is relatively weak to non-existent, right? So again, that uh, improvement or decline in yield based on changing maturities did depend based on our planting times, right? So that is what we were chasing, and we did see that in our data. These data are across 3 years, so pretty strong data set overall. And this figure is showing you all the pooled data across all years and planting dates into one figure. I think it's a very nice visual representation of our data, and I'll throw a bunch of these at you. So let me walk you through how to read this. X-axis is our planting date going from, again, end of April to early June, and you can also see day of year on that axis. And my y-axis is relative maturities, right? 99, again, as a reference, is our optimal. And then we are looking at the impact of going to later or longer maturities as well as early, right? And different colors here represent a different yield, right? Green is generally good, high yields, red is sort of bad, low yields, right? And here you can see again that trend I was talking about before. As we are pushing towards these early season plantings, going beyond 99 relative maturity, we are starting to see yield improvement, right? And as we are delayed, we did not see the relation to be very significant. I threw this table here as a nice representation of giving you some actual numbers. So for all the planting dates, you can see optimal RM yields in bushels. And again, you can see our May 10 planting was our highest yielding crop, right? And when we went to +5 or +10 relative maturity here, we are able to gain anywhere from 5 to 12% yield, right? While we did lose by going to early maturities. And when we were delayed end of May and June, pretty much no benefit of yield improvement. We were still seeing, again, yields not impacted as much. That we were a little bit surprised, and I will come back to that. So again, at least our recommendation here is that for timely early plantings, we can switch to 5 up to 10 units longer maturities than we typically use, right? But this is only yield, right? Uh, what are the drivers behind it, right? To make sure we are not seeing differences due to genetics, but some physiological mechanisms, right? So we looked at yield components and we saw what we were expecting. Uh, Kernel number was our main driver. I think it accounted for almost 60% of the total yield gain we were seeing. And you can see as we were pushing towards those early season plantings, we did increase our number of kernels. We were approaching more than 5,000 per square meter compared to uh, 4,000 or even lower than that, right? So typically what happens is if we push higher number of kernels, our kernel weight might go down and you gain nothing, right? So we did not see that. Fortunately, we were able to push those higher number of kernels while maintaining a pretty good kernel weight. You can see typically 30 to 32 grams is pretty typical for 100 corn weight, and we were maintaining or even pushing a little bit higher up to 33 or 34 with those early plantings, longer maturities, right? So that was encouraging that we had a physiological basis for our yield improvements. But again, if we're thinking profits, we need to look at the quality, right? In terms of what sort of test weight and moisture we are seeing out there. And again, you can see that early plantings and longer maturities, we are able to maintain pretty decent test weight, right? Close to that 56 uh, pounds per bushel, right? 55 or 56. So we are able to maintain that high test weight as well as keep moisture low, right? You can see with those early plantings, longer maturities, we are around that 20% number. So we are able, our goal is to push it below 20%, right? To maximize again our profits, field dry down, and we are able to again lower the moisture and maintain high test weight going with this early timely planting and use of longer relative maturities. So let's put all this together in terms of profits. Again, we looked only at a subset of cost, right? Corn price, dry down cost, any discounts due to low test weights actually. So you can see again sort of relatively similar trends, right? With early planting dates as well as longer maturities over here, we are able to maximize our profits compared to again sticking with optimal or using early maturities with those early plantings, right? So again, something similar data like I showed you for yield. Uh, you can see for each of our planting date, the actual partial returns for our optimal maturity, right? Again, with May 10th giving us the highest profits here. And when we did switch to plus 5 RM, we are gaining anywhere from 4 to 5%. And then plus 10 RM, we are able to gain 5 to 8%. But pretty much nothing as we are dealing with the delayed plantings, right? And our actual recommendation, again, is that when we are dealing with this, at least June plantings, we want people to be switching to at least 5 units earlier, right? We were again surprised to see how well the optimal maturities did, even under these late planting conditions. And I will come back to that. There is a phenomena we believe that's behind this, right? And that can sort of help us think through switching to earlier maturities when the planting is delayed, right? So I think our recommendation is if we are dealing with end of April, early May plantings, yeah, go with 5 up to 10 units longer maturities. End of May, probably good to stick with the optimal maturity. And for June plantings, maybe go towards up to 5 units earlier maturities to minimize any potential issues with the frost occurring before we are mature and maximizing our dry down. The reason we think the optimals did pretty well with these really late plantings is this phenomena called growing degree day compression. We all know that corn growth and development is driven by heat accumulation, right? Growing degree days. But what we are finding out is this phenomena, GDD compression, which pretty much means that the corn hybrid sort of speeds up, so to speak, to maturity with the delay in planting. So again, that's the phenomena that I think few researchers did study back in the 90s. Bob Nielsen at Purdue, I think, did some work on this. So we wanted to make sure that it's still true for the current genetics. I think we didn't see as much of this in 2019 when the plantings were delayed. So we looked at, again, multiple hybrids. You can see three over here, typical versus longer maturities, right? And actual growing degree days for all of these plantings going from April all the way into June. And these downward facing slopes tells me that, yeah, that compression or speeding up was happening. If it was not, these lines would be flat, right? So again, with the delay in planting, as we move towards the right side of this figure, those hybrids needed a less number of growing degree units. And you can see the actual dates they reached black layer, right? Even for our early plantings, you can see these longer maturities were still able to reach black layer end of September, early October, which is pretty good, right? The amount of this compression, again, we did quantify that. The number was about 6.4 growing degree days decline per day delay in planting. And this data is from, again, planting up to black layer. We also looked at planting to silking and did see some compression speeding up happening here as well. But you can see the slope of these lines are not as uh, much as we saw in the last figure, right? Again, most of our silking did occur in mid to end of July for those early planting, later maturities, which is good. In terms of compression, again, we did see some, but not as much as what we saw for the black layer, right? So in terms of overall numbers, here is some data, again, to give you some ideas. The average, again, about 1.4 from planting to silking, but 6.4 from planting to black layer. So most of the compression we are seeing is occurring after silking, right? Only about 25% until silking, and the rest from silking to black layer, right? The reasons behind this, I think we're still trying to understand. I believe something to do with the weather clues in terms of cooler environment, temperatures, maybe relative humidity, something we're still trying to, I think, understand more so. The magnitudes you can see do vary based on a given season weather conditions and things like that. So again, there is variability there. One thing we definitely have seen that the total compression does depend on the relative maturity of the hybrid. So you can see those early maturing 89, 95 maturities were hovering around 4 to 5, right? Versus almost 7 to 8 growing degree days per day delay in planting, right? So again, sort of a good average number here, but sort of spread based on these maturities as well. So how do we make this data actionable, right? Again, because we need more planning again in terms of thinking about how to maximize profits looking into future. This tool useful to usable. It's a publicly available tool on this website. And I believe it's a really nifty tool in terms of planning, right? All we have to do is enter our location in terms of the county, and then the planting date. That's a growing degree day start date, and then either enter your hybrid relative maturity over here. I personally prefer growing degree days because it's more quantitative, right? And you can find that information on your hybrid from your seed dealer or going online. And once you input that information, again, ahead of even time, right? It use a few, sort of weather predictions to give you the estimates. And then in season, it's actually using the current year's growing season weather, right? But it spits you the time to silking over here in the red line, and then time to black layer. Here you can see sort of mid-October compared to all these blue bars is your frost probability. And here the highest bar is your sort of median towards of end of October in our location, right? One caveat here is this tool does not account for that growing degree decompression, the speeding up phenomena, but one can manually change these numbers, right? As an example here, I use that 6.4 average. 30 is the number of days after May 1 decline. So I come up with this new number, 2283, and I punch that number in. And now the tool is giving me the black layer is occurring end of September compared to mid-October, right? So that's quite meaningful. And I can use this in terms of planning, what sort of maturities I need to be picking based on when I'm able to plant a couple of my fields, right? And the using growing degree days is also very critical. Again, I'll show you data here from Michigan, but it's relevant for other states as well. Compared to 90s, if you look at the color of these maps over the last few decades, it's getting darker, meaning we are accumulating more growing degree days within that even May through September, our typical growing season, in addition to extension of that season, right? So what does that mean? Right? I think that to me is that we can take advantage of this by using the information of hybrid growing degree days and not rely only on RM ratings. We know those RM ratings are relative scale. 99 RM does not mean 99 days from planting to maturity, right? So growing degree days is more quantitative and I think can help sort of account for these weather trends we are seeing. Here is some data we have recently published. So over the last 5 years, how many growing degree days your location is accumulating, right? You can also use a sensor from your field to get this data, but know that this is again based on the fall and spring frost event. So do account for your planting date. If your field is a good candidate for early planting versus typical or delayed planting, because that will change this number and then the total growing degree day you want for your hybrids. When we think again about this, how could we can maximize profits, right? Kernel dry down out in the field, I believe is very, very critical. We all have seen some rule of thumb numbers, half percent decline per day and things like that. That data is a lot of work. You can see how we get these data where we send grassroots pretty much every day out there and record the decline in moisture until it reaches this plateau where there is no further decline, right? And you can see the variability between our years, right? 23 sort of stood out because the fall was sort of wet and cool, and the dry down was much delayed compared to everything else. And you can see this is for a typical maturity, and you can compare that to our longer maturity, where we were surprised to see the amount of dry down we were still able to get. Again, sort of a wet year was not ideal, but everything else we did get a pretty good field dry down. These data sort of results into a couple of again these rule of thumb numbers that are again a more relevant, recent data from current genetics and environment. And you can see again couple of trends mostly from these typical years. 23 again, as I said, was a sort of an outlier in terms of wet fall conditions, right? And you can see again that amount of kernel moisture at black layer or how low we are able to get. But again, this 0.7 is what we are able to see that per day decline or dry down for our typical maturity, typical planting date. But look for these longer maturities. We are still able to get that up to 0.6 or so, right? And even under delayed planting, still around 0.6. So pretty encouraging numbers that, again, will help with more field dry down and improve our profits. How do we estimate moisture in field? Again, can be a sticking point because it's a lot of work, right? You go out, you take ears, break them, use a moisture meter. We have been looking at a couple of these non-destructive ways to estimate moisture. One example, this NIR-based sensor SIO we have used, and you can see you pretty much open the husk and latch it on. and within 10 seconds, you get a moisture reading. And that was spot on compared to our oven dry. That sensor over multiple years hybrids did a really good job, anywhere from 15 all the way to 60% moisture. So even dealing with high moisture situations did a really good job, and something we can use in terms of looking at weather, looking at our field dry down before actually going ahead with that harvesting. One last point I want to make here. I think I've heard a lot about this phantom yield loss. And we were interesting, is part of it coming from the loss in kernel weight after we reach black layer? So multiple data here from different relative maturities across different planting dates, different years, growing seasons. We did not see a decline in kernel weight after we reach that black layer. So the data starts from black layer, and you can see we tracked it almost a month afterwards, and we did not see that. So we did not see that phantom yield loss coming from kernel weight. Talking to growers, I believe it's still real, but it's probably coming from field losses in terms of lodging and things like that, or mechanical issues, header loss, and things like that. So something to keep in mind. To wrap things up again, we are seeing that the optimal corn hybrid maturity is dependent on planting date. So we are seeing a pretty significant interaction there, not only for yield, but also yield components, test weight, moisture, and overall profits, right? And what we are recommending to folks is that, yeah, if we are able to plant our fields, a subset on our farm, under timely conditions, using later maturity, these longer RM hybrids does work out up to 5 or 10 units, right? Exact number again will depend on your specific location. This is where we need more research from other locations, regions, to get to those specific numbers, but the basic concept is still true. Early planting use these longer maturities. While the planting gets delayed, I think we do get benefit from this growing degree decompression, this speeding up phenomena. So end of May, we can stick with the same maturities, but going into June to again improve or minimize any risk, going to 5 units or so early maturities does work. And overall, our recommendation is go with a portfolio approach, right? Select multiple maturities. One thing it gives you is at least a genetic diversity, right? Because we know same RM from different companies sometime might be the exact same genetics. So if we do vary our relative maturities, we are getting some genetic diversity, right? And we know our fields, we know again, based on field conditions, soil texture, drainage, slope, or low-lying areas, there are fields that are good candidates for early planting, right? Maybe 20, 30%. Think about using later, longer maturities in those, right? And still be aware that we want to still sort of pick multiple maturities. So we are stacking corn pollination. So it's not occurring within like a short week to 10-day window. Because if it gets dry during that window, corn does not like that. And right, all bets are off. So making sure we are stacking our corn pollination by changing our planting dates and relative maturities, I think is a way to sort of succeed across different weather conditions. With that, again, I would like to point out to our website, agronomy.msu.edu, where all of our information is. My contact is here, so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And I would like to thank everyone in our team who helped with this work, especially Benjamin. This was part of his PhD work. And again, I would like to thank everyone for listening.